It's time to do a video about the vintage t-shirt. So today I want to talk about the vintage t-shirts and you. First of all, we all know the vintage tee goes by many names. The old t-shirt, the boomers sloppy seconds, El Diablo in some countries. But I thought it would be quite interesting to talk about the vintage t-shirt today just because I find it somewhat interesting. I mean, look, you've got like a stern grommet on a t-shirt. Let's just jump into it. The vintage t-shirt. The ultimate wearable memorabilia since 1970 something. From charity shops to artists to collectors to curated stores and you, yes you the viewer at home, the vintage t-shirt has been on a wild ride. You can find almost anything printed on a vintage t-shirt. Brands, bands, teams, memes, rappers, scrappers. And what colour t-shirt are you looking for? We've got white, red, blue, 50 shades of faded black. Most people would even argue that vintage t-shirts are a lot better in quality than those printed today. I honestly can't validate such a blanket statement, but some of the t-shirts I own, oh my god. Some of the t-shirts I own, big, thick, boxy, cozy, chungus type beat tees that fit way too big so often, we've even got a name for it. We call that the baggy oversized fit, son. Label size says medium, fits like XXL. No refunds, you'll grow into it. The vintage garment is the only piece that gets a free pass if you ruin it in some kind of shape, way or form. You put a hole in a H&M t-shirt, it's defective, trash, garbage, get it out of my sight. But if you throw a vintage tee into the actual Iron Maiden, poking multiple holes in the shirt looking like a Swiss cheese block, use it to clean the bird poop off the windscreen of your Honda Civic and then put it up for sale. It's distressed, thrashed, it has that vintage look, has character, adding value to the item. Hello, is this still for sale? So it's safe to say that the vintage tee has stood the test of time both physically and economically. Old tee good, new tee bad. Okay, you've got me all hyped up, bro. I'm ready to get my hands dirty and invest in some of those vintage tees I've been hearing so much about. How do I procure such a profound and trend transcending item? Thrifting, resellers, vintage stores, your dad's wardrobe, dumpster dive. No, actually don't do that. Thrifting. Thrifting is ground zero if you want to look for a good vintage t-shirt. Imagine you're Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark is actually a Salvation Army, but you're not the only person looking for the legend of the single stitch tee. No, you've got Nathan Drake, Tomb Raider, Brendan Fraser from The Mummy, all after the same Guns N' Roses 1989 tour t-shirt. Thrifting is built on a foundation of early bird gets the worm. It can be a competitive sport of salt throwing. There have been times where I've just squeezed in through the door and found grail after grail after grail. But when the positions are reversed, you're ready to throw hands over Hard Rock Calf t-shirts. The point I'm trying to make here is you can find vintage t-shirts at the thrift and it's probably the cheapest way to obtain one. I forgot to mention that. We're talking about an average of anywhere between £1 to £5 in my personal experience anyway. I've never paid for a t-shirt that's over £6, but just beware because you are not the only one looking for that affordable drip. So good luck with that. Resellers. If you want a slightly less stressful consumer experience at the cost of 300% markup, then go see the landlords of our generation, the shadow council gatekeepers of vintage clothing, the vintage online resellers. Vintage online resellers are very easy to come across. Just go on the explore page of any online marketplace and they'll be there. Most of them will have names like the vintage ... or something retro. This is probably the most calculated and precise way to get exactly what you're looking for because the amount of online sellers that sell vintage are easily in the tens of thousands. And some of the vintage t-shirts you find online are wild. You want a Fred Flintstone Wacky Racers NASCAR t-shirt? Too easy. Have you ever seen an official 90s Xanax promotional t-shirt? We got it. The McSatan t-shirt? We have strayed too far. The prices vary significantly from seller to seller. What's your budget, bro? I don't make the rules. That's just how it's been for thousands of years. So it's down to the seller to determine how much a t-shirt is worth, and it's down to you to perceive whether that price is worth it or not. Good luck with that. Vintage stores. The online experience can be very jarring for some. Just one peek into the abyss that is Depop drama can make any man close their account and never go back. So the next place I suggest are physical brick and mortar vintage stores that definitely come in different shapes and sizes. If you want your basic mainstream on trend vintage, or if you're just starting out in the whole vintage scene, then I recommend places like Rocket, Atika, more or less any bulky vintage store that you can find in Shoreditch. If you're not from the UK, then I'm pretty sure you can find one of these bulky vintage stores in any city with a gentrified district. But if you're a cultured individual, then I recommend going to more curated stores like Round 2, 194 Local, 99 Vintage, where there's more of a focus on heritage, high-end luxury, streetwear, and culturally relevant pieces. These stores are nostalgia traps. The advantage of going to an actual vintage store is more or less obvious. You get to see the vintage tee in its natural habitat. You get to eye up the size and fit of the shirt. And before you know it, boom, you're walking out of the store with a vintage PS2 t-shirt because you remember the startup sounds of a Saturday morning playing Ratchet and Clank. Good luck with that. But how do we identify a vintage t-shirt when we see one? What's the difference between this Rolling Stones tour t-shirt and this vintage style Rolling Stones H&M tee? How dare you ask me that? But see, when you asked, a vintage t-shirt was produced at least 20 years ago. There's still a debate to what is classed as actual vintage in the scene, so we'll just put a pin in that. The 20-year-old t-shirt claims an unintentional status of sustainability, both environmentally and economically. Whereas a H&M vintage style t-shirt doesn't contain those historic juices of the person who was actually at the Rolling Stones concert in the 80s. Isn't that wild? It's also widely known that fast fashion t-shirts were not made to last. Like, they will disintegrate in the wash after a couple of cycle spins. And there's the whole environmental side of it, where one fast fashion t-shirt takes like a swimming pool of Voss water to produce. H&M tee bad. You can identify a vintage t-shirt through one of the following methods. The most obvious one is to look at the tag at the back of the neck. Here are a few examples of vintage tags dated by year. This is normally a good identifier of a vintage t-shirt, but it takes a little bit of a trained eye and a bit of experience to get the hang of it. Another quick way to identify a vintage t-shirt is to see if the tee is single stitched or double stitched. Check the sleeves and the hem of a shirt to see if there's one or two stitch lines. If there's a single stitch line on the sleeve, then that is a really good indicator to suggest that the tee is true vintage. Just because, quick history lesson, manufacturers stopped using the single stitch method during the mid-90s to opt in for the more durable double stitch. Also, vintage graphic tees have a really handy detail which makes dating these shirts really easy. If you look hard enough at some vintage graphic t-shirts, you'll find this tiny piece of text at the bottom of the graphic. You see that? Right there, zoom and enhance, you see it? This will normally have the year of production and copyright information of who owns the graphic. But now we've finally come to the implementation side of things. How do I wear the vintage t-shirt? Well, the answer is simple. Wear it however you want, but I suppose as a fashion YouTuber, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't give you a couple of tips of how to wear the vintage shirt. I normally tuck my shit in. I have a whole video for that has surprisingly done well in views lately, so you know it's proper sound advice. I go a size up. I'm meant to be a size medium, but I go for size large and above. Sometimes it entirely depends on what the outfit calls for. If I'm going for a more casual look, then I just untuck the ting, let it all hang out. If I want it to have a little bit of form, like I'm going to a dinner party, then you gotta tuck your t-shirt in. It's only polite. So that was my little infomercial on the vintage tee. You have now been blessed with advanced vintage t-shirt knowledge. This was free information. You didn't have to sign up to Skillshare. So if you could just like the video, I'll consider that an appropriate form of payment. And if you want to be an absolute legend, then press that little subscribe button. Leave a comment letting me know you enjoyed the video, or I'll come to your house at 3 AM and steal your champion t-shirts. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching my videos, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, Philip DeFranco. Ooh. Oh wait, I forgot to say bye.